Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn Lemke, and I am the Plan Giving Officer here at Greater Twin Cities United Way. And we're really delighted that you're spending part of your day with us. We'd like it if you'd take a moment and let us know what is bringing you joy this summer. Personally, I just got back from the North Shore with my mother and sister, and that brought me a lot of joy. So please enter in some things that are bringing you joy recently. I've just got a quick couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We'll be taking your questions throughout the session, and we'll have a little time at the end as well. You can enter your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. This webinar is being recorded. You'll receive the recording and the presentation material in a follow-up email next week. So now I'd like to introduce John Wilgers, our President and CEO of Greater Twin Cities United Way. John?
Lynn, you're rushing me. I'm still putting what gives me joy into the chat. So let's see.
I should have
I don't
talked
know if
slower.
I can do two things at once. There you go. There's mine. Probably like many of you, I have spent an inordinate amount of time over the last 2 weeks watching the Olympics. And so while I appreciate the talent and the athleticism and the skills, what I think I had a particular appreciation for this year was watching the international sportsmanship, that regardless of what's happening in the world, that seems to be lost on our athletes. And, I appreciated that. So anyway, welcome everyone. It's really good to have you with us today for the 8th session in our Family Philanthropy Series. At Greater Twin Cities United Way, we are thought leaders in philanthropy, and so we appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you, our philanthropists, and also be setting the stage for tomorrow's philanthropists as well through this series. So again, thank you for joining us. I also want to say a special thank you to Ahmed Sirleaf. Ahmed is with Greater Twin Cities United Way, and you will have the opportunity to hear from him more shortly. We always want to thank and show our appreciation for our sponsors. So Faegre Drinker and Baird, through their generous support, we're able to provide programs like this and other events throughout the year. So thank you to Faegre and Baird. And also, we appreciate all of our Tocqueville Legacy Circle members, as well as our Legacy Society members. And these are the folks who, through estate and endowment gifts, are helping to ensure that our work is sustained and our community is supported for the years to come. So thanks to those of you who have provided for Greater Twin Cities United Way in your estates. I know that probably many of the people we have on the call are long-term, loyal, generous supporters of Greater Twin Cities United Way. And so you understand our work. You've heard me talk about our work before. But one of the things I like to talk about is the way our work has evolved over the last number of years. You can go back not really that far, and the focus on our work was primarily meeting the critical and urgent needs of our community. That is still super important, and we still do that. But we take a balanced approach to working in community now, where we are out there meeting urgent needs, and we are also looking to provide lasting change through working on the systems which can provide long-term sustainable solutions to some of the issues that our community encounters every day. So it's this balance of meeting urgent needs and making lasting change. Since a lot of our session today is going to be focused on housing, I thought I would illustrate that and how that works in the housing space. So what I would say, if you think about meeting urgent needs in housing, I'd look to our work in several different places. First of all, we do our community grant making, our operational unrestricted grants that we make every year. We're just getting ready to launch that process. So we're excited to be looking at the nonprofits in the community that are doing the best work in the housing space and including them in our grant portfolio, where they will receive these non-restricted operating grants for a 3-year period. That is just getting ready to launch. In addition, we operate our 211 call center. A large number, probably 40 to 50% of the calls that come into our 211 call center are focused on housing or housing related issues. So people who are in need of a safe place to live, whether that be on a short-term or long-term basis, folks who are having trouble with a difficult landlord, maybe they're having trouble paying their rent or making their house payment, they're having a utilities issue, they call into 211 call center. And like I said, 40 to 50% of our calls into 211 are housing related. And then also every year, our engagement team hosts volunteer activities related to housing. It's called Home for Good. And that's where we put together welcome home kits for folks who are exiting homelessness into stable housing for the first time in a while, and they don't have many of the necessary goods they need to set up a household. And so Home for Good is a volunteer initiative which packs these welcome home tubs or bins that have all kinds of things ranging from cooking supplies to cleaning supplies, dishes, blankets, towels, things that allow people to initially establish themselves in a house for the first time for quite some time. Those are examples of the work we're doing to meet urgent needs of our community. But like I said, we're also focused on lasting change. And where you'll see that is, first of all, through our policy and advocacy agenda, where we advocate for good housing policies. An example would be advocating for improved eviction laws and policies. And then we also have initiatives that focus on changing and disrupting the path into homelessness for our most vulnerable population. And that's called Pathways Home. And that is the program that Ahmed runs. And you're going to hear more about him on that program here in a few minutes. So like I said, it's a balance, addressing the urgent needs and also making lasting change, with our goal being to reduce homelessness and make those episodes of critical needs less frequent and non-recurring. So again, thank you for joining us here today. And we're going to move into our first discussion. And with that, I will hand it off to Mala Tao. Mala is our Vice President of Advancement Strategies and Donor Diversification. And Mala, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. You know, it's a real treat for me to be here today to facilitate our conversation around safe homes and secure futures. We'll be talking about one of our new initiative programs, as you heard from John, called Pathways Home. We'll also learn about Free Will, a free online will writing tool, and hear from one of our generous supporters who has created a will with Free Will, because we all need a will. I want this session to be as interactive as possible. So if folks have questions at any time, you are welcome to raise your hand or come off mute, or just place it in the chat and we'll get to them as best as we can. Before I bring Ahmed on, I'd like to give a quick recap of our last few sessions. In February, we shared about our United Way 211 helpline and referral program, along with our 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's a confidential service that provides listening and support, information and referral, and crisis intervention. We also shared a legacy planning tool called Charitable Gift Annuities. In June, we shared about our holistic grant making and our vision for housing stability. We also shared the difference between a donor advised fund versus a donor infusion fund. If you weren't able to attend any of these, or maybe want to revisit the sessions again, please reach out to Lynn Lemke. Her contact information will appear at the end. So today we have Ahmed Sirleaf with us. He'll be sharing with us. He will be sharing with us Greater Twin Cities United Way's program called Pathways Home. Ahmed is a program officer for Pathways Home. It's an innovation initiative that will transform our region's homelessness response system and prevent homelessness in two key populations: youth exiting foster care and adults involved with justice systems. Prior to the United Way, Ahmed worked for Hennepin County and was responsible for county-wide homeless prevention through the Family Homeless Prevention Assistance and federal COVID-19 emergency rental assistance programs. Previously, Ahmed worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development Overseas Missions in Liberia. Now, welcome, Ahmed. Before you get started, I've heard you use the term in past meetings, housing systems change. What does that mean?
Thank you. Thank you, Mala. It's great to be with you today to talk about Greater Twin Cities United Way's Pathways Home program. The housing system change really has to do with, from my 3 years, 4 years now work in the housing system here in the Twin Cities, really has to do with system practice shift, like policy shift, mentality shift, power dynamic shift. How do we treat, equity? How do we stream equity across housing access, for different populations, housing needs? As you know, to have a home is a basic human need. So it's really more than just having a roof over your head. So what are those policies and systems that create equity, access, to allow people, everybody, to have a place called home? It's really that is what people describe when they talk about housing systems change. Because
Thank you, Ahmed.
Yeah, it's a sort of multi-layer definition there, but that's my understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So thank you. I will launch into our discussion here about Pathways Home. I've really been thrilled and honored to run this initiative because the work we do in the community, with the community, through Pathways Home and all our innovation initiatives and other work that John described earlier are all very close to my heart. What we do with Pathways Home is to disrupt the pipeline into homelessness for these two critical populations that you mentioned: foster youth, young people who are exiting the foster care system, and people who are transitioning from incarceration. With our phase 1 pilot, which you will hear about shortly, we are focusing on young adults, so 18 to 24 population there. I'll briefly talk about the background, how we got to recognize this as a major problem we want to disrupt. Started with a 2018 task force, a governance task force that studied our homeless populations and homeless problems in our region. And that work identified two critical populations: young people who are exiting the foster care system and people who are living in incarceration. That transition period identified vulnerability as two critical populations that are most at risk of homelessness. So we designed Pathways Home, and the phase 1 of the work is a pilot 18-month, which will end in October. We've gone 16 months already in the work. And as you can see, if you have the slide, you can roll this slide there for me, for folks to see. Thank you. This Venn diagram here is our year 1 strategy, our 18-month that I've talked about strategy. First, to build capacity for new and expanded services. By that we mean nonprofit partners that we're working with, there are 11 of them in our pilot cohort, to really support them, build their capacity so that they can expand existing services they're providing, but also bring new services that create access to housing for these two populations that we're talking about. The second strategy is what I mentioned, transition. That transition experience is the most critical period where we're intervening in the lives of these young people. Foster youth, when they leave and they're exiting the system, they have a dilemma, really. They first have to become homeless in order to access other services, and sometimes, a lot of times, young people just want to move on to, have that freedom, and they opt out of these so-called extended benefit services, and then they realize that they can't make it on their own. There are all kinds of barriers in the way. Right? In Minnesota, about 400 young people exit the foster care system every year. Of that, only 42% are able to access what we call stable housing at age 21. So there's really a problem in that transition period. If we don't intervene, then they go on, not able to go to college, get their education, might even end up in the criminal legal system and the incarceration side of things. Similarly, for young people, or those who are living in incarceration too, there's no law, no safety net in our state that says they must be released to a home. In fact, according to recent wider homeless study data, about 26% of all adults that leave incarceration are directly released into homelessness in our state. So Pathways Home is really working as a system change initiative to change some of those practices and those laws that create risk and vulnerability, which is why we have this third part of our strategy for systems, policy shift, and resource shift. Next slide, please. And some of this, you'll hear me come back to some of these points that I'm raising in this slide one, which is really the core of the strategy for phase one, which ends in October. So how do we do the work? We, do this work by listening, by collaborating, by working across the system to really listen to our stakeholders. These are people who are closest to or impacted by the challenges or the urgent gaps that we want to address with Pathways Home. We co-create with the community. Promising models that we see can be scaled so that, we can have the greatest impact. We then scale and amplify results that we believe are the best outcomes that the initiative is producing. Next slide, let's talk about organizational capacity. So I mentioned in the strategy that one of the arms of the strategy is to really build capacity of the 11 nonprofit organizations, but not just those organizations. The way we structure Pathways Home was grant money plus, and the plus is technical assistance, right? The technical assistance services that we're providing through Pathways Home were needs that were identified during the recruitment process of these organizations. So for example, we have one TA provider that is providing organizational development work, like looking at strategy, looking at transition planning, board development, finances of these organizations, so that they're able to show up as stronger organizations that can go after the appropriate funding to support the work that we're doing. We are very proactive with this. And we've heard this mantra over and again that young people say there's nothing about youth without youth. So centering youth voice is a major part of Pathways Home. The way we do that is working closely with these nonprofit partners in our cohort with our youth engagement strategies to really ensure that young people have a voice, telling us about their needs and where the gaps are. At the same time, we're looking at data, we're looking internally, talking to our experts and our colleagues in the organization and so on. In the next slide, if we can shift to the next one, please. I want to talk about... Yes.
I'm going to have a quick question before you move on to the next slide. How do you bring in youth voices to help to inform the work?
Thank you. Thank you, Mara. There are different ways that we've been able to do that. Some of our partners, so for example, there's one partner that works with what they call YSN Youth Service Network. They're through our systems players engagement strategy, where which I didn't mention that aspect, which we directly go engage with, say, the state agencies, the new Department of Children, Families, and Youth, DCYF, I think it's Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And so the youth boards, there are youth councils, and so on. Several of our nonprofit partners actively convene those young people. They're collecting participant feedback data from them, but at the same time, they're engaging with them in convenings, inviting them, and trying to get their feedback on the services that they're receiving. That was a good question. Thank you. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So now I want to talk about collaboration. Okay, sorry. So filling the funding gaps. How Pathways Home has filled funding gaps. There are other housing models in our region that are doing this work. We just believe that Pathways Home is really helping to address where the gaps are to target at the systems level to show the way in a way. And we've heard that a lot of times that Pathways Home is really a game changer, the way we do what we call cross-sector partnership, collective action for collective impact. One example I always cite is this FYI, which is fostering youth for independence vouchers. These are federal vouchers that come to the state with all kinds of requirements, come to the counties, and the county then gives to nonprofit partners. But the problem is it doesn't come with any service dollars. A lot of these organizations that have housing programs for youth have these FYI vouchers, but they can't use them because you really have to turn an apartment or space to a home for a young person, just like all of us, to turn it into a home, right? Where they can feel belong, so that sense of belonging, can have friends and families and host celebrations and so on. So Pathways Home is helping to activate these housing programs that have been dormant for a long time, with these FYI vouchers that they don't utilize. We're also supporting and restarting programs that have not been active for a long time because of either lack of funding, lack of technical support, or they just don't have the right frontline staff to run these programs. So we're really going out, working with these partners, identifying what their needs are, where can we intervene with technical assistance, with the grant funding. We're very flexible with the money we give them to be able to activate in these programs, these housing programs. One area that we identified early on was this so-called non-housing services, like move-in packages for young people to be able to move in their apartments and be comfortable turning them into homes. There are other items like childcare, utilities, and so on that are not considered by other housing models. We are not coming in one word we use is that our program is unencumbered. We're now asking certain eligibility requirements because we see those as barriers in the first place. And because Pathways Home is intervening at the systems level, meaning we're looking at the policy, the laws, and the funding streams that are creating risk at the direct service level. In order to disrupt that, we have to lead by examples. And by example, give the partners money, be flexible with them, support them technical assistance, and then engage directly with the system. The next slide, if we can move please to the next slide there, thank you. It's about what I mentioned earlier, this cross-sector work that we're doing, collective impact for collective action. We really mean that it's an intentional part of the phase one design of Pathways Home, where we're identifying sectors and areas that otherwise wouldn't see themselves as concerned with housing. Because this work, housing is a complicated area, really. One organization or sector cannot do it all alone. So we have to identify other organizations and partners in the system, whether at the system level or the direct service level or these counties housing programs, to be able to work together to leverage the expertise of the stakeholders and expertise of our cohort members. I mentioned there are 11 of them that we're working with right now. One thing we do is we've encouraged these convenings. We hold community of practice convenings where cohort members who had been competitors, and they're still competitors, right? Because they all go after similar funding, the same grant funding. Prior to Pathways Home, they will not share practice, they can share. Yeah, it was very competitive and uncomfortable environment at the expense of the young people. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're intentionally doing that, but that's the nature of the work. So what we did in order to break that cycle was to bring these nonprofit partners into community of practice convening, where they're learning. They're coming as teachers, as trainers, but also as learners, where we bring experts, where where there are gaps for knowledge, we bring in outsiders to train and talk to them. And then they start to form these micro connections, now sharing referrals among themselves, identifying who has what services that are most suited for which young person. So then now we see that they're also now applying for grants or going after funding, collaborating together to apply for funds. They become more comfortable to share practice and instead of being competitive and not really talking to to one another. So just creating the space to learn and be comfortable has been, we've really seen that as a power the power of collaboration that has enhanced the work of Pathways Home.
Ahmed, why the collaboration though? Can't we just decide what is best? I mean, you're really smart, you know the programs well, you're working with you're working with different people, but why do we need to collaborate?
Thank you. Yeah, so as I said, the work that we designed phase one with Pathways on my list, it was very intentional. It's a learning period, 18 months. We didn't do work plan. For example, we said instead of work plan, we want learning plans so that organizations are identifying areas that they want to learn and improve. And that includes the service they're providing, right? But what are other things that they need to improve or be able to learn from other organizations? So we can't do that without bringing them together and also pointing out that there are other sectors that you may not think of as housing or homelessness prevention sectors. And so how do we make this trauma-informed, culturally sensitive, culturally competent programming? How do we program like equity through the work you do? Can we re-examine how you engage young people, how you engage different diverse community of youth in these two critical populations? To do that, one strategy was to convene people on a regular basis. Every other month, we meet in a cohort convening. As I said, they come as trainers and teachers because they are the experts who really know the work. But where there are gaps, so for example, one area to identify where we've been bringing outside experts is how do you do legislative advocacy? How do you do policy change advocacy work, things like that? And so Heart Connection, who is our technical TA provider who convenes these meetings, brought in some experts of their own that have been training and teaching our cohort members. So they're collaborating to break that competition, the competitive spirit of going after grant fundings. We can share how we do our work and why we're successful and how we're successful in this area and the other. Now they're sharing. So collaboration, our view, has worked. It's powerful because they're sharing practice, they're sharing resources, they're jointly applying for funds, and they're identifying among themselves whose services are best suited for which young person.
Ahmed, this makes so much sense. These convenings that create these opportunities for partnerships and collaborations. It makes so much sense. And yet I remember when we launched this 2 years ago, I remember the excitement that was in that room from our partners and people who had been on our advisory council, who were saying things like, nobody has ever done this with us before. This is the first time we've been brought together to talk about, systems issues and common solutions. And so I know the feedback we've had from our teams for creating these types of opportunities has been really good. Precisely.
Yes, John. Thank you. I remember those comments as well. Like, this is a game changer. This is just what we needed. And it has been like that throughout these convenings that we've done. Like every other month we meet. If I'm not meeting with them, doing one-on-one, they're meeting in a convening, and sometimes they're forming macro groups, like 2 or 3 organizations meeting on their own, inviting me over. It has been really an eye-opening experience for me as well. Yeah. So let's talk about challenges that have come out of, I think the next slide, that have come out of the data, but also these convenings and conversations that we've been having. So the one thing that's very clear is that as a major barrier, just too much documentation requirements, eligibility requirements for a young person. So for example, somebody who went to prison as a young person, they lost their birth certificate, their driver's license, all those basic IDs that we take for granted, we carried around, they don't have them. And then now they're transitioning back to the community and people are asking them to provide a driver's license, a birth certificate, where's this other paperwork in order to access housing. And that has been a barrier. Even for foster youth as well, it has been a major barrier that the cohort has identified. Another is that there's not enough housing for both of these populations, really. Not enough housing for individuals exiting the foster care system, period. Not enough housing for justice-involved individuals as well. On top of that, what I mentioned earlier about the non-housing services, this is an area where even service providers themselves have admitted that they've neglected. There's not a lot of programming around what are your needs other than housing, or now that you have an apartment, you have, moving package, you are in the home. What else do you need to make this community, your community, to be successful here? Those are the kinds of questions that they deal with in the cohort convening, and have identified as some of the areas that still need to be improved, still need to be worked on. So some solutions. Was someone speaking?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that this is, it doesn't matter which system. This is frustrating. Whether you're talking about the housing system, we could probably have a similar slide up if we were talking about unemployment benefits or filing a medical claim. It just seems like the documentation requirements, the barriers, the options seem to be like a community-wide issue. And I think I was going to ask whether we have, I know I was going to ask whether we have work streams or solutions in place. And I think I cut you off as you were just getting ready to talk about that. But I just have the observation that this list would be a list that you could apply to most systems out there, not just housing.
That's accurate. That's correct. Yeah. So the next slide will sort of talk about some of what have been advanced as solutions. And we're in the middle of, as I speak, designing phase 2 of the initiative. And you'll see that design, these are concrete actionable items that have come out of this 18 months of learning. And we're taking out to design to go into how do we solve these practical problems of simplification, which is how do you make a complex housing system so simple that a young person can easily, this system run around can stop, basically. So yeah, intake process. How do you streamline intake process so that, for example, you have one application for all non-housing services, for example. How do you increase housing options for these two populations? Those are some of the solutions that we're now building into the phase 2 of the work that you will see coming online very soon. For foster youth who are exiting the system, to be able to directly enter into programs. Because what we have in Hennepin County is what's called a coordinated entry system. It's also, again, a federal requirement, usually coming to the state and the counties, that everybody who has needs for housing must go through this one pipe. Basically, you enter through this system, ideally, so that they identify your needs and then send you to the appropriate services. The problem is not working the way it was designed to work. And that is not served most populations well, but particularly foster youth and people who are living in incarceration, particularly young adults that we're serving right now. My last slide, I want to talk about changes in policies and practices. I mentioned the system change in the beginning. It's really about working to shift policies, laws, and practices. Some of the underlying complex issues we deal with, whether it's racism or some kind of inequality. How do you work around engaging with the system directly? And by system, described earlier on these different layers of housing problems and challenges. How do you remove these conditions so that to be eligible for housing is not such a difficult thing, particularly for a young person who's really just coming of age, trying to start their life. And one the area we're targeting is to improve coordination, even at the state agency level, county level, and then direct service level, which is why we're working with these direct service partners to begin to collaborate so they get used to working together and breaking some of these silos. The referral process and intergenerational understanding of needs, cultural understanding of needs, and so on. So this is what we've been doing with Pathways Home for the last 18 months. Our final report will be out in October. We're wrapping up the pilot, and we'll begin phase two very, very soon. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Ahmed. I know you shared a lot with us, and I know that our guests and I will get a copy of your slides, so thank you. What is the one thing you want people to take away from with all the information you shared today?
Thank you, Mara. Thank you again for inviting me to speak about pathways. Some compressed period of time, a lot of information. One thing I will say is that youth homelessness is everybody's business. Really, when a young person thrives in this, they do well. They do well in school, well with their health, their mental health. The community does well. Our state does well. So whether it's through funding, it's through just doing the work, with providing expertise or your resources to do the work. People who are doing the Greater Twin Cities United Way, I think it just sends the message that this is our responsibility for our community.
I love that. Thank you, Ahmed, for taking the time to share with everyone today about your work or our work. I love that quote that you have, is housing is everyone's problem. So I will leave it at that. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
We're going to switch over here in our first session of the year on our 211 hotline. We heard from our speaker, Julie, that during the pandemic, there was an increase in housing needs by 286%. And youth exiting foster care and people exiting incarceration are overrepresented among people experiencing homelessness and housing security. In our last session, we heard from our speaker, Jay, who spoke about our multi-year grant making meets urgent needs of our community. And today we heard from Ahmed why changing policies and practices is critical to creating long-term solution. Meeting the urgent needs of the community is as critical as making lasting change through housing advocacy for youth exiting foster care and people exiting incarceration. Immediate housing solutions provide critical stability, preventing homelessness and its associated risks. Simultaneously, housing advocacy addresses systematic barriers, fostering long-term change by promoting policies that ensure sustainable support and integration for these vulnerable populations. Individual philanthropy plays a crucial role in this dual approach. By providing immediate financial resources, individual donors can directly support emergency housing initiatives, ensuring that those in need have a safe place to stay. Additionally, philanthropic efforts can fund advocacy programs that work toward lasting systems change, such as policy reforms and the development of supportive housing programs. This holistic approach not only addresses the urgent need for shelter, but also creates a foundation for lasting change, helping to break the cycle of instability and offering a pathway to a more secure and independent future for youth exiting foster care and people exiting incarceration. Creating a will or utilizing tools like free will can be instrumental in creating lasting change. A well-planned will can balance immediate charitable contributions with endowments or trusts that support ongoing advocacy and reform efforts. This dual approach ensures both urgent and systemic needs are met, helping you create a comprehensive strategy for lasting change. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your gifts help meet urgent needs and your support can make lasting change. When we are planning this session, we realized it would be helpful to share information about lasting change through a will. United Way Worldwide has a partnership with Free Will, which is an online will writing tool. Creating a will, you not only secure your own estate, but also play a pivotal role in addressing pressing social issues and fostering long-term improvements. Tools like Free Will make this possible, make this process accessible and straightforward, empowering more people to make a difference. So before we jump in, I just want to gauge to all our friends here in this session, and just do a poll here is, do you have a will? Is it yes, no, I don't think it's something I need, or no, but I'm considering it, or I don't know? Do we have the answers? I'm curious to see what folks are saying here. It's about equal with yes and no, but I'm considering it. Well, if you are considering it, we have Lynn here to share a little bit more about free will.
Thanks, Mala. These are really interesting results, but actually nationally, only 67% of Americans have a will. So let's just start quickly with what happens if you don't have a will and you pass away. When someone dies without a valid will, their assets are distributed according to the state-specific rules. And these rules determine who inherits the assets and how they are divided. When you do pass away, you leave any material things behind. The saying goes, you can't take it with you. That includes assets like your real estate, your cash, vehicles, jewelry, other valuables. Most people want to make sure that they leave those earthly possessions and that they're passed along to their loved ones. But unless people clearly communicate your wishes in a legally binding estate planning document like a last will and testament, your plans may not be carried out as you wanted. Having a will is the primary tool to carry out your wishes for your family, your assets, and even your philanthropy. Charitable giving through your will is an effective way to reflect your legacy. So let's go to the next slide. When should you create a will? Well, life is full of unexpected events, and that reminds us of the importance of planning for the future. One of the most profound acts of care and consideration we can perform is to ensure that our loved ones have a clear path to follow in our absence. An unexpected death of a loved one is devastating. Creating your will is not just about legal formalities. It's really a gift of love and guidance for your family. So anytime is really the right time to create or revise a will, but there are a few key points in life that really should trigger considering making a will or updating your will. Many financial advisors would say starting a will at 18 is really a good idea. That's because people that are just turning 18 have newly responsibilities for their finances. A lot of young adults, of course, that's the furthest thing from their mind. But other common life events are marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Combining assets is a crucial time to start estate planning. You need to take time to determine what happens in the event of one of the spouse's deaths, as well as if you both pass away. If you find yourself divorced, it's also critical to update any previous estate plans that were made with your former spouse. Having children, it's one of the most obvious estate planning triggers. It's a good time to think about your children's guardianship and financial security in case anything should happen. And of course, owning a home, this could be like your largest asset that will be left after your lifetime. And so it's a great time to consider creating that will or updating it. So, and then travel is another time people often forget about. It's recommended that you update your will for big trips, particularly if you travel for long periods of time or frequently leave the country. Other good times to consider are if you receive an inheritance of money or other assets, and if grandchildren come into the family. Next slide. So your will is an expression of your values. Charitable giving is a meaningful way to reflect your legacy. It's important to have an open conversation ahead of time with your family and really let them know what your estate plan says and does, including your philanthropic wishes. And there's a number of benefits to including a legacy gift to a nonprofit close to your heart, such as Greater Twin Cities United Way. It affirms your values to your family, creates an enduring legacy beyond your lifetime, and it's flexible because you can change your will anytime during your lifetime. So let's go to the next slide. Many of our Greater Twin Cities United Way Legacy Society members have created a will through our partnership with Free Will. And Rachel, please go ahead and drop a link to Free Will in the chat for our guests. So let's go to the next slide. So Free Will, as Mala mentioned, United Way Worldwide and Greater Twin Cities United Way has partnered with Free Will to offer our supporters a free online will writing tool. There is absolutely no cost. It is free and available to anyone 18 and older. You can write your will from the comfort of your home. It's quick and easy to complete, generally taking only 20 minutes, maybe 30. And free will creates a legal will customized to your wishes. It's a great tool. It can be used and paired with an attorney for complex estates. So if you don't have a simple estate, but you're getting into complex estate issues, you can also use the free will you created in your meeting with your attorney.
And what is the difference between a will and a trust?
Well, thanks for your question. The will is a legal document that directs who will receive your assets and the property at the time of your death, whereas a trust is a legal arrangement where a trustee, someone you select, manages and holds title to your assets and property and distributes income to the beneficiaries that you select.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for your explanation. We have a very wonderful guest who's taking time out of his day to come and share his experience about using free will. His name is Chris Wicker. Chris has been serving community since joining the U.S. Air Force straight out of high school. As an intelligence analyst with 6 years of honorable active duty service, Chris supported collection operations in both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. As a defense contractor, he served as an operations consultant to the multinational militaries coalition in Afghanistan over 4 combat zone deployments. After 10 years of service to this nation's security and others, Chris used his leadership and strategy experience to become a leader in small business. Through 11 years of small business ownership, Chris used all his free time to lead nonprofit advocacy for support of small businesses, culminating in his appointment to the nation's largest chapter of SCORE, a small business mentoring organization. Today, Chris serves small businesses throughout his home state of Minnesota as a deputy director of Small Business Administration, Minnesota District. He and his wife, Brenda, adopted a teenager from foster care in 2019 and continue to serve child welfare efforts in the Twin Cities. I am so privileged here to have Chris join us and just share his lived experience and his story with everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think when you summarize it all like that, I don't feel as old as I felt this morning when I woke up. Thank you. If you can't tell from the pale background behind me, I am at work right now. So I am obligated by law to just say that I'm on my personal time right now, and everything I say today is not the opinion of the government or the Small Business Administration. I'm officially on lunch break, so this is just me, not Deputy Director me. So thank you very much. Thanks, John. Thanks, Mala. I'm just I love this work. I love community work. It's basically been everything I've ever done. So I'm just really glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
I would love for you to share your story and how you got involved in the United Way, Chris.
Yeah, there's 2 simple answers to that. One of them, I was a small business owner when I was living in Tampa, Florida, and I ended up becoming acquainted with somebody who was acquainted with the CEO of United Way Suncoast, a woman at the time whose name was Suzanne McCormick. She took me under her wing and taught me how to do business and taught me how to love nonprofit work and community service. She's progressed beyond that post these days, but the lunches that I had with her every single quarter were invaluable. And so United Way just kind of like wedged this place in my heart. And so when my wife and I moved to the Twin Cities in 2020, we had adopted a teenager from the foster care system. My wife and I met in the military. Our contractor experience when we were living in Afghanistan, that was based out of Tampa. We did that work together, and it was time to do something different. So we decided to do really different and just adopted a 15-year-old and picked up sticks and came up to Minnesota. And it seemed the right thing to do. I've always loved the work of United Way, and I'm sure Lynn sent me a mailer or something that made me think of it again, and here I am. And that was 4 years ago, and I'm still paying attention.
Wow. I had the opportunity to meet you and Brenda, and you're both still very young. What prompted you and your wife to create a will, and why did you decide to use free will?
Well, a little bit of cheating. When I moved to Minnesota, I had a great job lined up as a management consultant. And as luck would have it, a global pandemic emerged out of nowhere. And so I ended up unemployed, and that company collapsed. I was unemployed. My father-in-law recruited me as a financial advisor. And so as I was studying to get the securities licenses, I pretty quickly realized the importance of not only today's finances, but tomorrow's finances, and then, you know, the great beyond finances. And I wanted to do something that lived beyond the work that we were doing. As a military person, I had, you know, given that blood, sweat, and tears as a young person without much else to do. As a foster parent, my wife and I wanted to make an impact on a single life and to do something really important for one person that lived forever. And then my son is now 20 years old. He's joined the Army himself, which I'm super proud of. And we're empty nesters at the age of 40, which is kind of an incredible experience. And so as I sat down in 2020 and thinking about what's next, not to be morbid, but it got me thinking about what was after not only my community and my country and this one individual, but what would happen after we were gone. And so leaving a legacy to me, even if it's just a tiny amount, I wanted something to live beyond me. I wanted my son to see something live beyond me, not just all the annoying teenager quarrels that we may have had, but like actual real things into the world. And so that lasting impression, that impact on my son, that was definitely the most important thing to me.
You know, you talk about legacy. What are the values do you carry with you, and did anyone influence your values?
I think everybody has influenced my values. The married couple that lived across the street from me growing up in Woodbury, one of them was an Air Force veteran. He taught me about national security and service. I didn't know that. Nobody in my family had served in the military before me. I learned about community from where my parents took us around to the farmers markets. And when you see people in your community coming together and doing things, that was pretty impactful. But I have to say the most meaningful thing that I experienced was doing security operations in Kabul, Afghanistan. Here's a community torn by war and trying to keep their culture intact, trying to raise their kids right, trying to instill values while all of this chaos goes on around them. That had an unerasable impact on my brain and on my memory. And that level of service is the kind of service I think anybody could aspire to be. And I don't know that I'll ever get there, but certainly trying has made me feel pretty good about it.
Well, you're still 40, so you've got a lot of time left. You know, you talked about your values and principles. What do you want to pass on to the future generations?
I want my son to know selflessness. You know, serving in uniform is a certain kind of selfless. It's inherently selfish while it's selfless. He's not going to have to pay for college now. He doesn't have to worry about paying his bills right now, which, judging by the amount of money he spends on video games, I don't think he'd be paying bills if he wasn't in the military. So this has been a great national service for him to do while also benefiting him. But true selflessness, truly looking at the community around you and saying, I'm going to give something that I'll never get back. I'm not going to benefit from it. Nobody's going to tell you thank you per se, although Lynn very kindly tells me thank you from time to time. I want to show my son what real selflessness is. And again, putting something out into the world purely one directional. And to be able to do that, again, with my relationship with United Way and even in my will, I won't even be around to see it. I think to me, that's about the most meaningful value I can show somebody.
I love that. I'm going to steal that because I just told my son just today to get a job. So I'm going to probably steal that from you.
Please, if you need a strategy to convince your kid to join the military, I've done that one. I've got a checklist.
I'll give you a call. You know, you've talked about like the importance of like doing something and not expecting to get back. What are some causes or organizations that is most important to you and your family?
Well, my wife and I do care deeply about the affairs of veterans. We obviously know a lot of veterans from our work. My wife and I both spent 6 years on active duty in uniform. I deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea, although that wasn't much of a deployment. My wife went to Afghanistan in uniform, and then we both went to Afghanistan as defense contractors. So the veterans world is really, really, really important to us. Once you've experienced the child welfare system, that's another thing that I think feels a little bit selfless and has an whatever the word is for unerasable, indelible, like you can't ever forget the experiences of the child welfare system. And so learning what we lived in there, we had 3 foster kids. 2 of them we were not able to adopt, and so those were failed fosters. That's an incredible and painful and difficult experience all by itself. And so to understand the system, to go through the tough parts, and to still come out with a beautiful kid afterwards, to me is again, it's unforgettable. And so that's something that'll always be very meaningful to me. And then, of course, if I'm being a little bit selfish, again, still totally on personal time, small business to me means everything. My work with SCORE was volunteering. I love community service. I love economic development. Watching the community around me grow and prosper, whether it's through restaurants or a local cleaning company, those are great things to just, again, watch the world bloom and know that you had some small part of it. How could you want for anything more?
Mm-hmm. You know, just to bring us back to the wills thing, it made me kind of think, like, when I think of wills, I imagine an attorney sitting at a big desk with a family in the room, reading off a long list of assets. You know, I don't have any assets, and I'm still raising my family, taking care of my parents. I have a 401k and life insurance, but can a will work for someone like me with very little assets?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sitting here at work talking to you guys because I'm not awesome at time management. So I kind of wedged this into my day. And the idea of free will, and I probably Googled it, is how I came up with that. The idea of free will is a game changer, absolute game changer. The slide that I saw said 20 to 30 minutes. I think I did it in 15. The younger that you are, the fewer assets that you have. It's super user friendly. It's really easy to understand. And most importantly, it's completely free. When I was going in and out of Afghanistan every year, I hired an attorney and I had all of my assets detailed in this really complex document. And I was able to do the entire thing again on my own using free will. And I feel like I feel very confident that I got the same quality product. So the thing that I would say to everybody who's in here today, if I could ask everyone to just do me personally one small favor, tell your neighbor, tell your kids, your grandkids, your cousins, your nephews and nieces. Everybody can do this. Everybody who is over the age of 18 and has more than $50 to their name should do this. This is not only about legacy planning, which is really important, but having a plan for what happens to your assets and having the opportunity with as little or as much as you have to pass some of that forward as easily as this is a must do for everybody. I ask everybody to please recommend this.
Thank you, Chris. If you heard it here, if there's nothing that you do today, at least do a free will. Thank you. I know you and Brenda shared your Why United Way story with our team through a video, and we'd like to share that video with our audience. Rachel, if you can just drop that in the chat. Thank you again, Chris, for just making the time to be here, share your story, share how easy it is to do a free will. I appreciate it very much.
It's my absolute pleasure. I'm definitely going to have to jump right from this meeting and go back to work, but thank you all again. Thank you for your attention. John, Mala, Lynn, everybody, just really appreciate your time. You guys have a great one.
Thanks, Chris. Now, before I hand it back to John in a moment to close out our session, a brief survey link is being posted in the chat. Please take the survey now, as your answers will help us create future events that are meaningful to our audience like you. We're grateful for your feedback. A reminder that by taking the survey, you will be entered in a drawing to win a Greater Twin Cities United Way stainless steel tumbler and a t-shirt. John, I'm going to pass it to you. John, you're on mute.
Thanks, Mala. And thanks everybody for joining us today. You know, after Chris gets done, you just kind of feel like you had to drop the mic and, you know, because there's just not much more you can say. So I'm not going to say much more, but we are grateful that Chris joined us today. Ahmed, also thank you for joining us and telling us about Pathways Home and the great progress we're making on that initiative. Like you said, as we work to disrupt the path into homelessness for some of our most vulnerable community members. I always want to circle back and thank our sponsors, Faegre and Baird, for sponsoring this and other events and initiatives here at Greater Twin Cities United Way. We are deeply appreciative. And also you've heard a lot today about wills and about free will and about estate planning. And many of you are, but if you are interested in considering including Greater Twin Cities United Way in your estate plan, I invite you to reach out to Lynn. Lynn's information is, I think it's on the screen right now. So you can reach out to Lynn and she can assist you with that. So again, thank you for your support. Thanks for joining us here today and have a really great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.